Kelly had always been someone the world thought it knew. Breezy laughter on morning TV, perfectly timed wisecracks, the kind of smile people screenshotted when they needed brightness. But the Kelly the cameras adored was only one version, practiced, polished, resilient. Tonight, standing in a corridor smelling of antiseptic and lemon-scented hand soap, she felt like a different person entirely, raw as exposed wire, small as the scrap of paper holding the next sentence of news the doctor would read aloud. The first call came at 3:12 a.m., the kind you never expect unless you write melodrama for a living. A production assistant from the network had woken her, voice soft, careful, telling her to come to the hospital. There were no specifics beyond emergency. Mark was on a monitor at Jefferson General, just 5 minutes from their Upper West Side apartment, and she needed to hurry. She drove through rain-sliced headlights, her breath fogging the windshield as if the night itself sought to keep her from arriving. The city blurred into streaks of sodium light. Inside, her hands gripped the wheel like a cold, living animal. She thought of nothing and everything, of Mark making coffee over the weekend in a rumpled sweater, of his conspiratorial text messages about small things, the veggie market closing early, a neighbor's cat, and of him resting his head on her lap during a flight, breathing through turbulence as if life itself were a song. He could ride out anything. Then she thought of nothing at all and drove, like most things that demand movement when your insides feel frozen. When she arrived, the emergency room hummed like a fluorescent cave. Nurses and doctors moved like choreographed currents. A security guard guided her past clusters of chairs where anxious families waited, knuckles clenched over phones. She found him, Mark surrounded by plastic and glass, wires branching from his chest like a small forest of lightning bolts. For a moment, she couldn't reconcile the man she loved with the pale stillness under the blanket. He opened his eyes and smiled, a thin thread of sunlight almost forgotten. "Hey," he mouthed. Kelly answered with a laugh that broke inwardly. "Hey." The word did not stick the way it should have. She sat carefully, not touching any beeping instruments, and cupped his hand. His skin was cool. Dr. Evelyn Hart entered, carrying a soft authority born of years of practice and exacting good sense. "Mrs. Ripa," Dr. Hart said. "I'm Dr. Hart. You can call me Evelyn if you like. Can you tell me what happened before he arrived?" Kelly spoke haltingly. The breakfast they'd shared, the sudden dizziness, the brief collapse on the kitchen floor like a failing stage prop, the paramedics, the siren, the blur of hospital lights. She watched Dr. Hart's face fold and refold like a paper map. The word stroke leaked out, then bleed, then medical jargon that sounded like foreign currency. They moved quickly to imaging, to machines quieter than the pounding in Kelly's ears. Mark was placed in a room that felt like a tiny planet edged in white. The CT scan returned blunt facts. A massive hemorrhagic stroke, the kind that rewrites a body instantly. A blood vessel in his brain had ruptured. He would be taken to the ICU. The prognosis was a breath held in a windless room. In the waiting area, the three of them, Kelly, her son Joaquin, and their agent, formed a knot. The agent, a friend with work etched across her face, was all practical icy fear. Studio heads called. Producers wanted statements. Morning show planners considered cancellations and replacements. Beyond corporate voices, friends and neighbors arrived, sitting in threadbare chairs as if proximity could stitch the tear. Joaquin came running, sneakers squeaking, face a mix of tears and resolve. Kelly hugged him with a bone-deep fierceness, feeling the raw edges of parenthood, the impossible task of holding yourself together in front of your child. When Mark was wheeled into the ICU, it resembled a small city of glass and machines. A whiteboard above his bed bore his name and the time. Sensors and lines threaded everywhere that mattered. The doctor spoke in a language of urgency.
We'll monitor
and options.
intracranial pressure and may need surgery if it rises further, Dr. Hart said. Kelly listened as though taking dictation in a language she had no intention of fully understanding. She held Mark's hand, memorizing the sweep of his knuckles, the crescent scar on his thumb from an early fishing trip, every small architecture of him that made the thought of losing him unbearable. Practical details arrived like rain: insurance questions, pediatric pickups, messages to answer. Kelly's public life, the years of morning show banter that made her a symbol of unruffled charm, was suddenly irrelevant. She wanted to tell the cameras to go away. Instead, she tucked her phone into her pocket and breathed. Everything in the hospital moved in measured steps. Nurses changed shifts. A respiratory tech adjusted a ventilator. Light slid over Mark's face, catching his eyelashes like a tiny blessing. He squeezed her hand once, then slept. Hours bled into one another. Specialists wrote on clipboards. The ward's clock ticked like a heart. Late in the afternoon, Dr. Hart returned, her face unclipped from good news. "Kelly," she said, "there's been a change. We're seeing swelling, and Mark's condition has deteriorated. We need to consider an urgent neurosurgical procedure to reduce intracranial pressure. There's risk with surgery and without it. Continued swelling could be fatal. It's not an easy decision. We wanted to give you this update in person before proceeding." Kelly's world, already narrowed to the space around Mark's bed, contracted again. She had faced pragmatic calls before, but never a choice that felt like a fork in life. Her mind split: mother, ready to hold her child steady, and wife, trying to be a partner able to choose between outcomes. She asked questions that made sense in a vacuum. What are the chances? What will this mean if he wakes? What happens if we do nothing? Dr. Hart answered with blunt compassion: no certainties. The surgical team could perform a decompressive craniectomy, removing part of the skull to allow swelling to subside and reduce pressure. It could save his life, but leave deficits: motor impairment, speech difficulties, personality changes. Without surgery, the swelling could cause devastating brain damage or death. Words like motor and speech landed like stones. Kelly imagined Mark without his quick, taunting banter, the way he mimicked game show hosts or practiced goofy accents. She imagined being at home making art with Joaquin and him unable to participate. She pictured the slow, stubborn defeat of the man who raced on stage, crossed her across sitcom sound stages with half smiles and bouquets of slightly too expensive flowers. Joaquin whispered, trembling, "Mom, do the surgery." The child's certainty did not lift the weight. Kelly thought of Mark's parents, of rituals and faith, of calls to priests and old friends. She thought of wedding vows and the small promises tucked in decades of marriage. Being there, keeping each other, not letting go. She signed the consent forms with a shaky hand and waited. The surgical team prepped Mark. Dr. Patel, the surgeon, explained the steps briefly, promising they would do everything possible. The elevator doors closed, carrying Mark away, and the air in the room thinned. Outside the OR, the world resumed its cruel rhythm. Update portals beeped with corporate concern masquerading as compassion. Messages arrived from colleagues, some sweet, some terrified, some professional. A network videographer offered to cancel taping, take whatever time you need. The very structure of Kelly's life bent to the gravity of this sterile place. In the waiting room, grief and hope performed a strange duet. Friends brought food that tasted of condolence. A neighbor held a thermos of coffee that had gone cold. News vans idled across the street like black beetles. Someone with a camera had been here earlier. Kelly felt the weight of the world pressing against the hospital windows. The operation lasted longer than expected. Nurses offered outdated magazines, the kind meant to distract while time dragged.